I'm pretending to be Kevin Feige for a day, and I've got the baseball hat to prove it. So let's talk about what I would do if I ran Marvel. This show is brought to you by Babbel. Go to babbel.com/Dan to get 55% off your subscription, and stay tuned after the show for more info. Rules and restrictions may apply. Hey everybody, I'm Dan Murrell, and I'm super excited to do a little bit of an experiment. I've done this a few times if I ran movie theaters, if I ran DC, and I basically take something that I think could perhaps use a little bit of improvement or advice that they surely won't take and that's really unsolicited, and try to explain what I would do if I were given the reins of power over something for just one day or maybe a week, a month, a year. I don't know. It depends on how long these changes take to make. Full disclosure, I am pre-taping this because I'm away on my honeymoon a few days before the Marvels comes out. However, I have had a chance to review it. You can see that here on the channel, and it is absolutely packed with things that I was already planning to address in this video. I don't know what the box office performance of the movie is going to be as of now, but the outlook isn't great, and even if it did open strongly, quite frankly, most of what I'm saying would still apply. Despite some box office and critical hits in the last few years, like Loki, WandaVision, Spider-Man No Way Home, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the MCU has gone from rarely disappointing to sporadically effective, with projects like Eternals, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and Secret Invasion proving to be disappointments in various ways. While Marvel was once considered almost invincible, the misses are beginning to pile up with critics, fans, and at the box office. So without further ado, let's get into what I would do if you put me in Kevin Feige's chair and if I ran Marvel. Number 1, stop. Finish what you started and reevaluate the rest. That's right, I am wiping the slate clean. Now, I want to be very clear, that doesn't mean that everything that Marvel has going on is canceled forever. It just means that we are going to stop what we're doing right now, unless it is in an active production cycle or late into the production cycle, which means that we are going to go ahead and finish work on Deadpool 3. We're going to finish Captain America Brave New World. Echo is still going to come out. We're going to finish the Agatha Darkhold Diary show. Ironheart is still going to come out, because these are all things reportedly that are deep into the production process. We're not going to cancel that. We're not going to scrap what we've got there, but there are a lot of things that we are going to stop production on. One of them is the new Daredevil show, and some people would say, well, wait, Dan, before the strike started, they actually got started on production for that. So wouldn't that fall into the things that we should finish? Not necessarily, because there were reports that have come out recently saying that the show is going to be significantly retooled. So before we continue work on the new Daredevil show, we are going to put it under the same pause that everything else is, and that pause also includes Thunderbolts, Blade, Avengers Kang Dynasty, Avengers Secret Wars, Armor Wars. Again, that's not to say that none of this stuff will ever be resuscitated or revived, but we have to have a plan first before we move on with any of this. Number 2, rewatch and learn. This may sound kind of infantile, but I want everyone at Marvel to get together and have a movie, really like a movie week. I'm talking everybody from Kevin Feige to the heads of visual effects, the heads of physical production, your producers, as many of your creative team. Hell, get some of your actors in there. Get everyone together and watch everything that Marvel's made. Not the stuff like Hulk and Ang Lee and all that stuff. I mean everything that falls under the MCU proper. Start with Iron Man and go all the way through. What worked about Phase 1? What didn't work about Phase 1? What has worked about these MCU shows? What hasn't worked? Take it all down to the basic building blocks and have an honest dialogue. Don't just look at the great movies and say, oh, we did great with that one. Point out the flaws in the great one. Point out the great things about the not so great ones. But you really have to go back and break down what it is that people loved about this thing in the first place and what it is that inspired others creatively before you can go forward and try to replicate that magic. Number 3, go back to formula. I know, things don't go well for Marvel characters when they're told to go back to formula.
We need to take the whole line back to formula.
Back to formula.
But there's a difference between going back to a formula and making something that's formulaic. Formulaic just means that you're coloring by the numbers, basically. Well, it has this thing, that thing, and the other thing. And I think that's partially how Marvel got here to begin with. Now, when I say going back to formula, I mean making things that are based on what fans responded to from the very beginning. I'm talking about a universe that's built not on epic crossover events, but that has meaningful stories about individual heroes first. The Guardians weren't introduced as the team that would bring down Thanos. Now, yes, Thanos was in the first Guardians film, but the first Guardians movie was about those characters, it was about the formation of those characters. And even though they played a critical part in what happened down the road, first James Gunn sold us on who those characters were. It was not about building what they were going to do next, it was about building who they are now. And when you look back at the Marvel projects, the MCU projects that have been successful critically and financially, that is generally the case. You make a hero that people love and you build a story around them. And that's what I'm talking about when I say go back to the Marvel formula. They sell you on the hero, then they sell you on their role in the story. And somehow, some way in the last few years, the cart has come before the horse and the prioritization of the ongoing saga has become number one and the characters get lost in the shuffle. And I think that's a big reason why audience attention is drifting. Number 4, nothing is safe and no idea is off limits. So as a team, we at Marvel have stopped what we're doing. We've watched what we've done. We've decided we're going to go back to what works. Now is the time to start formulating that plan. And I think a crucial part of that plan is to explore every option. So if somebody's at the table and pitches an idea of bringing back Chris Evans as Captain America, let's explore that option. Can we do it in a way that makes sense? Can we do it in a way that doesn't cheapen the ending that that character already got? If somebody pitches, hey, let's never see Doctor Strange again, let's go down that option. Does he have a role to play in the stories that we want to tell? Are we going to force that character into a story where he's not needed? You can put some characters on hiatus. That's okay. If you have an idea for some crazy one-off DC crossovers, go ahead, pitch that idea. Maybe we won't use that idea, but there could be a germ of something in that idea that somebody else uses or that you realize is something that could be used going forward. Sure, you're going to hit some dead ends, and maybe you'll come up with something that completely falls through because an actor says no or there's a legal problem. But the point is that you're making things that are ambitious, that people are excited about, and that isn't just kind of in the routine of the steps of something that's already been laid out. When you throw a bunch of different ideas against the wall, some of those ideas are going to be great, some of those ideas are going to be bad, and some of them are going to lead to stuff that maybe you didn't expect. Number 5, make a creative plan, not a marketing plan. So when we're talking about the right time to make the next Avengers movie, what I don't want is some sort of discussion about our Q4 2026 release and the relative strength of the market of Q4 2026 versus Q4 2027, and the fact that marketing research has shown, no, I don't want any of that. The only thing that should be important when we're talking about when the next time to make the next Avengers movie is when it makes sense story-wise to make the next Avengers movie. Is it next year? Great. Is it in 5 years? That's great. Do we just not know yet? That's fine. Don't come up with a plan for when we're going to make movies based on how people want to sell them. Forcing movies into theaters in order to keep characters alive for marketing or merchandising purposes, in my opinion, shortens the lifespans of those characters. It doesn't lengthen them. I think that you run the risk of the audience getting tired of a character that they see too often, or maybe a character that they just don't like. Do we need 3 different Ant-Man movies? I don't necessarily think so, and I love Ant-Man. If audiences like the story and they like the character, then odds are they're going to show up for the next movie that the character is in, regardless of how long the break is between those different movies. And so you don't have to worry about when you're going to make that next Avengers film. Although, speaking of the Avengers, number 6, give the Avengers a break. Yes, it's possible that somebody comes up with a great Avengers story, but in my opinion, I think it's time to give the Avengers a hiatus. And listen, they were a great team. They anchored 10 years of Marvel storytelling, some of the most successful filmmaking of all time. They brought in billions of dollars. Most of those movies were critically well received. People love the Avengers, but I think it's time to give them a rest. You can still focus on individual characters that are in the Avengers, but as far as the team of Earth's mightiest heroes, I think it's time to put them on the shelf until people, and I know this might seem like a novel concept, miss them. They want to see them. It's not like, oh, another Avengers movie? What was the last one? Who's even in the Avengers? No, you want people saying, wait, when are the Avengers coming back? I can't wait for that next movie. And even if some of the other Avengers movies, recent stuff, haven't been that well received, Time heals all wounds. If you don't believe me, just ask Andrew Garfield. He went from what some people thought was the most disappointing Spider-Man they'd ever seen on screen. They didn't like The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Audiences completely rejected that film, to being what people loved the most for many people about Spider-Man No Way Home. If something's not working, put it away, wait for a while, and you never know, in 5 or 10 years, people just might miss it and want more of it. Number 7, rebuild with Fantastic Four, X-Men, and Spider-Man. Spider-Man is a lucrative character. He has been successful inside the MCU. He has been successful outside the MCU. It is rare to find a Spider-Man project of any type directly tied to Spider-Man that's a financial or often even a critical disappointment. I know that people love the original Fantastic Four movies, I think largely for nostalgic reasons or for cult hit reasons. However, I think that those movies are far from sacred, so there's a lot that can be done there. And I think that audiences are ready for good X-Men movies again. People love the X-Men movies, the original ones, but it's been about 20 years since they came out, and there are a lot of really bad X-Men movies. So some people might say, well, wait, no, X-Men is played out. I would disagree. I would say that good X-Men isn't played out. It's just that so many of the X-Men movies of the last 10 years haven't been good. Keeping in mind that you want to be receptive to all ideas, I think that X-Men and Fantastic Four should be the main focus and main priority, not after the Avengers movies that we already have planned. Now, they were the backbone of Marvel for many years in the comic book universe. Disney, you bought Fox for a reason. For billions of dollars, use these properties. Let them come out and play. Don't make them take a backseat to these other plans that quite frankly aren't working. Let's get them into theaters sooner rather than later. Now, it does appear that there's some motion in this direction as set up in the Marvels, but I think it's important not to rush this by sloppily incorporating these characters into an existing arc. This has to be done carefully and deliberately. You only get one chance to relaunch these characters. Let's make sure it's done right. Number 8, if you're going to multiverse, then multiverse. The introduction of a multiverse offers literally unlimited possibilities, but I really think that the MCU has only successfully used it once with Spider-Man No Way Home, which is one of the most successful Marvel movies of all time. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness got people buzzing, but its multiverse sequence was ultimately a disappointment, and the Loki-Kang multiverse story has been slow to develop, although I should note, I have not seen the end of Loki Season 2 as I'm taping this right now, so perhaps there is something big that moves that along, but even still, I don't really quite know what's going to happen with Kang going forward. Nobody really does. It's time to go out and find stories that will get audiences excited in the same way that Spider-Man No Way Home did. Now, what does that look like? It could be a series of one-shot movies featuring different teams of returning characters or characters that aren't tied to the direct Marvel mythology. It could be a team-up of different people in the X-Men franchise, like we saw with Days of Future Past, which was an audience and critical favorite. It could be a Marvel Zombies movie. Again, literally, the possibilities are endless. Embrace the one-off and the crossover, and stop taking the multiverse and trying to constrain it and bend it into this one storyline, this one thing that you're trying to tell. Don't draw a box around it. Let it be what it is, which is a box of limitless possibilities. There's a lot of different things you can do to get audiences excited by that. Just do them. Number 9, budget wisely. Spend what you need, not what you can. This doesn't mean that we're returning to the days of making huge movies on shoestring budgets that look cheap. I'm not saying cheap out on films. If you have a movie with the scale of storytelling that requires $200 million, then we can talk about budgeting it at $200 million. But if a director walks in with a Blade movie that they can execute for $40 million, don't spend $140 million on it. If Emerald Fennell walks in with a $15 million Dazzler script, then make the Dazzler movie for $15 million. Just because it says Marvel at the beginning of the movie doesn't mean it has to have an extravagant budget. You should make the movie for what you can make that movie for based on the vision of the writer and the director. And just from a financial perspective, your exposure is lower with a lower budgeted film. And if you hit a movie that costs $40 million or $50 million and makes that MCU gross of $500 or $600 or $700 million worldwide, That is a huge path to profitability that is substantially hampered by a $200 to $250 million budget. I think that one easy rule of thumb is that you should never set the budget for an MCU film before a director is hired. We should not be in the business of making $200 million movies before we even look to see who's going to guide that film creatively. Number 10, no more figuring it out with reshoots. Reshoots in and of themselves aren't bad. They're actually a luxury because oftentimes if you're editing a film, you notice that there's a scene that could work if there was a piece of dialogue that was tweaked just a little bit. Or maybe you notice that there's a little bit of a connective tissue between two scenes that if you can go back and reshoot that, then that'll make the story flow better. That's fine, and it happens all the time with movies. But by many accounts, that's not been how Marvel is using reshoots, or at least it's not how they've been using it for a long, long time. Increasingly, it seems like the MCU is skimping on the writing process and shooting a show and basically going in with the philosophy of, well, if something doesn't work, we'll just figure it out in reshoots. And then they go back for these costly reshoots, not to shoot a scene or a line of dialogue, but to do 30% or 40% or 50% or more of your show or movie over again, which is not only creatively irresponsible, but also incredibly expensive. It was very obvious that The Marvels was largely reshot and reassembled, which was a big reason why I thought that movie was a complete mess. Maybe movies have been saved in the past by using reshoots as a rewriting process, but we now have a $250 million piece of evidence showing us the perils of that approach. The goal for every Marvel movie going forward is that the script as written is usable. In an ideal world, everything that's on the page should be what's required to put the movie on the screen. And if you find later on that other stuff is needed, then you can be open to doing reshoots. But no more of this, hey, we're going to throw $150 million in a movie or show and see what works because the script's not quite done and we don't really know what's going to happen. And then we'll figure it out with reshoots later. It's sloppy and it's obvious. It's obvious that so many movies or shows were figured out in post and done rushed. The VFX look rushed. The stories don't make sense. That ends now. When I run Marvel, no more of this creative process through reshooting. Reshoots are done as necessary, not as part of the creative process. Number 11, call your shot. Kinda. Now, some would say that this kind of contradicts what I've been saying about not making a marketing plan or keeping yourself creatively free, but I really think that when you look back at phase one, they did it right in the sense that we sort of knew what was going on, but the movies weren't really locked into it. There were certain hints that were dropped that we were heading towards the Infinity Saga. Of course, Thanos' appearance at the end of the Avengers in 2012 was the biggest indication of where we were going. But those movies, by and large, were their own films with little hints of what was to come. And I really think that the things that don't work about Avengers Age of Ultron were the things that were specifically put there to hardwire us into basically the Infinity Saga. So when I say call your shot, I don't mean lock your storytelling into an unalterable cycle of films that are all planned out 4 years in advance. What I mean is, let's talk about a general idea of what our big thing is going to be in 5 to 7 years. And as we go down that path right now, we can start dropping some hints, and they don't even have to be things that are promising something, just like a little thing here or there that if it pays off, great. If not, it's a little Easter egg for comic book readers or people that know the mythology and the lore. But if we have a rough idea of the basic direction that we're going, then as we go, we can refine that process and eventually end up where we need to be. I think it's what largely worked with the Infinity Saga, with a few bumps in the road here and there. But by the time we got to 2018, 2019 approaching Endgame, then every movie felt like it had its specific part to play while still being allowed to be its own thing. And the audience realized that too. One of the big reasons, I think, why Captain Marvel was such a massive hit in 2019 was that people believed they had to see the movie in order to know what was going to happen. Because it came between Infinity War and Endgame, people thought that it was necessary viewing. Same with Ant-Man and the Wasp. I think that movie did a lot better for that exact same reason. So we're still going to do that. We're not locking ourselves into a solid plan, but we are going to come up with a general game plan 5 to 7 years down the line. Where are we going to go? And we're going to slowly move that way while still keeping ourselves free to develop different projects as we go. And finally, number 12, the rule of threes. Never more than 3 movies in a year, 3 shows in a year, and 3 projects in active physical production at once. And this rule is pretty simple. The MCU, in my opinion, should never be putting out more than 6 projects in 1 year. 3 movies, 3 shows on Disney+. I think more than that, you're absolutely killing demand and you're making storytelling inessential. And the big thing about Marvel that it has to get back is that idea of being essential. That every movie and every show is an absolute necessity to see because it is an integral part of the puzzle. That has been lost. For the long-term survival of the brand and of the MCU as we know it, you have to get it back. And some people would say, well, you can never recapture that magic. And to a certain extent, that's true, but you can try. And I think with a little planning, with scaling back in production, and with doing these other things that I said, we can try to get back to that magic of the MCU. Because let's be honest, if the MCU is even half as successful as it was before, if you adjust these budgets, it can still be one of the most successful movie franchises out there, especially if it's delivering high quality, well thought out movies and shows to fans who want them and who miss those characters. The creatives at Marvel have to give everything their full attention, which is why I'm saying 3 movies a year, 3 shows a year, 3 things that are actively being produced at one time, and that is a hard and fast rule. It seems like Marvel's already moving that way. I am codifying it. We're going to get back to basics. We're going to figure out what worked, and we're going to make Marvel amazing again because I think that it can be, and I think that the fans out there want that. They just have to get out of their own way. So those would be my steps for if I ran Marvel. What about you? What would you do if you were given creative control over the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Let me know down in the comments below. And before we go, I want to thank the sponsor for this video, Babbel. Languages may not be universal, but sounds are, and no matter what language you speak, when you hear this sound, that means that you're using Babbel, where you can start speaking a new language in just 3 weeks. Why Babbel? Well, because it works. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are designed by over 150 language experts to help you start speaking a new language, and Babbel is designed by real people for real conversations. You could pay hundreds of dollars for a private tutor or play fancy games on other apps, or you could actually start learning with Babbel. With over 10 million subscriptions sold, Babbel is real language learning for real conversations, built with science-based cognitive tools like spaced repetition and interactive lessons created by real language teachers and voiced by real native speakers. If you're serious about speaking another language, what Babbel can promise you are useful language skills along with the context, traditions, and culture that the language you're learning is grounded in. It's not always easy, but it is always simple. Here's a special limited time deal for our listeners and viewers to get you started right now. Get 55% off your Babbel subscription, but only for people that watch and listen to the show at babbel.com/Dan. Get 55% off at babbel.com/Dan. That's spelled BABBEL.com/Dan. Rules and restrictions may apply. Be sure to stay tuned for more movie news, reviews, box office, and more things like this. And thanks for spending part of your day here with me. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.